The front door clicked shut like she was trying not to wake a sleeping child. But there was no child. Just me. Wide awake. Sitting in the dark. Still pretending not to know. Her keys hit the bowl by the entrance, 3 seconds late. She always paused after coming home late, like she had to rehearse her face before walking in. Tonight, I didn't even look up. I stirred the pot of soup I'd already let burn twice. Then she said it. Not with drama. Not with tears. Not with anger. I think we should get a divorce. Not, I'm unhappy. Not, we need to talk. Not even, can we fix this? Just that. Cold. Surgical. Like she was cutting off a tag on a new dress. I didn't answer. Not at first. The soup bubbled, bitter and overcooked. I watched a carrot split in half and sink. Did you hear me? She asked, almost annoyed. I nodded. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Did he help you write that line? Or did you come up with it yourself? Silence. No denial. No outrage. Just a breath. She stepped back slightly, as if my words had landed in a way she didn't expect. And that's when I realized something. She thought I was stupid. No, not just stupid. Predictable. Soft. Safe. The kind of man who would cry and sleep on the couch and beg her to stay while she packed for a weekend getaway with him. The kind of man who would crumble. And for years I was. But not tonight. Tonight I smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough for her to notice. Just enough to make her question if she really had the upper hand anymore. Okay, I said. You want a divorce? I turned off the burner. Let's make it fast. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I didn't even ask why. Because I already knew. And because I had already started. She thought she dropped the first piece. She had no idea the board was rigged from the start. She didn't say anything right away. Just stood there by the door, fingers still resting on the edge of the frame like she hadn't fully committed to being inside. Her shoes were wet. It hadn't rained in our town in 3 days. I let that detail sit. You want wine? I asked casually, already pulling 2 glasses down from the cabinet. She hesitated. That threw me off. Normally, she would have said no just to maintain control. But tonight, she nodded. Sure. I poured hers first, watching it swirl like something bleeding in slow motion. Then I poured mine, just a little. Enough to toast. Enough to say, let's pretend a little longer. We clinked glasses. She didn't look at me when we did. I took a sip. She didn't. Just held it, like it was some prop she wasn't sure how to use. This is weird, she finally muttered. I didn't expect you to take it this well. I smiled again, not warmly, not cruelly. Just that tight, unreadable expression that makes people more nervous than a scream would. I know. She blinked, waited for me to fill in the blanks. I didn't. I let silence do the talking. That night, she slept in the guest room. I didn't even suggest it. She just drifted that way, like it was instinct. Like the house had already rearranged itself. But I didn't sleep at all. At 3 a.m. I got up, opened the freezer, and pulled out the envelope I'd sealed inside a plastic bag, tucked between the ice packs and the bag of peas we never ate. She always hated how cold I kept the freezer. She never went near it. Inside that envelope were photos, screenshots, GPS logs, printouts, a credit card statement that showed a dinner in a city 2 hours away. On the same night, she told me she was at a women's networking mixer. Hotel check-ins. A receipt for room service under Miles Kendrick. And the last item? A note I'd written to myself 5 months ago. Wait until she asks. Don't move first. Don't chase. Don't warn. Let her dig her own grave and hand you the shovel. I was never a vengeful man. I'm still not. But that night, standing barefoot in the kitchen, staring at that note, I felt something deeper than anger. Control. For the first time in our marriage, I had it. And I wasn't going to waste it yelling or throwing things. I was going to be precise. By morning, she'd made herself coffee without offering me any. A small rebellion, as if to re-establish dominance. She still didn't know that I had already updated the passwords, that I'd already called a lawyer, that I had already filed first, and had it couriered the night before she said the word divorce. She thought she was taking the lead. She didn't even realize she was already behind. The silence between us had turned into its own language. Every clink of a spoon, every half-opened drawer, every too long pause between words, they all said things we didn't have the courage to. She still hadn't asked what I planned to do, whether I'd move out or fight her on the divorce. Maybe she thought if she said nothing, she could control the pace. But I was 3 steps ahead of her, and she didn't know it. On Thursday, I left the house early. Didn't tell her where I was going. I just took the truck and disappeared before sunrise. She'd wake up to an empty garage and no note, the kind of thing that used to drive her mad when I forgot to mention errands. Except this time, I wanted her mind to spiral. I wanted her wondering, calculating. Did I go to a lawyer? Did I find out more than I let on? Did I tell someone? I didn't go far. Just parked by the lake and waited. At 10:46 a.m., my phone buzzed. Hey, you okay? No, good morning. No curiosity masked as concern. Just that short message. Dry? Defensive. I stared at it for a while, letting her sit in the uncertainty. Then I replied, Yep, productive morning. No smiley. No follow-up. I imagined her reading that message a dozen times, trying to figure out if it was a threat or a bluff. The irony is, I hadn't done anything that morning, yet. But the illusion that I had was already starting to eat at her. By the time I came home, she had put on makeup. Not much, just a little concealer and lipstick. Subtle enough to act like she wasn't trying, but I knew her tells. She only did that when she wanted to feel in control or manipulate it. You went out early, she said, folding a towel on the counter like we were roommates discussing laundry. Everything okay? I smiled. Actually, yeah. I got some clarity. Her eyebrows twitched for half a second. Then she nodded too quickly. That's good, she said. I sat down, opened the mail like it was just another Thursday. She hovered, pretending to tidy the kitchen, but she wasn't looking at the dishes. She was trying to read my face. That night, I left my laptop open on the dining table. On purpose. The screen displayed an email thread from a law office. Short and clean. Subject: divorce filing. Expedited request confirmed. Body: we'll have the documents delivered Friday morning. She won't expect this timeline. You'll have the advantage. I left it there like bait. Went to bed early, didn't say goodnight. She stayed downstairs. At 2:13 a.m., I heard the chair squeak. She had read it. The next morning, she was dressed before I was. She made coffee. My mug. Hazelnut creamer. No words. For the first time in years, I watched her try to anticipate me. But the best part? The email was fake. I wrote it. Sent it to myself from a dummy account. I wanted to see what fear looked like on her. Not the kind of fear that comes from yelling or threats, but the quiet dread of losing control. She thought I was still reacting to her move. She had no idea she was already trapped in mine, and I was only getting started. Friday morning started like nothing had happened. Greta was standing by the stove flipping eggs, humming softly like some suburban Stepford illusion. It was almost funny, as if she thought putting on a performance would rewrite the past week. I played along, made small talk, even asked if she wanted to go out for dinner that evening. Her eyes lit up, just for a flash, and then she narrowed them, confused, like she was trying to figure out why I was asking. I didn't offer an explanation. I let her live in the ambiguity. We went to a quiet place downtown, a cozy Italian restaurant she used to love before she outgrew pasta and started ordering overpriced kale and talking about intermittent fasting. It had rained earlier, and the sidewalks were still wet. She wore the burgundy coat I gave her 2 birthdays ago, the one she hadn't touched since last fall. I held the door open for her, told her she looked beautiful. She smiled. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't look rehearsed. It looked desperate. We sat in the corner booth. She ordered wine. I ordered whiskey. Then I brought up the name. Miles. Her hand twitched just slightly as she reached for the wine glass. She stared down at the menu, pretended she didn't hear me. But her face turned a shade paler. I know, Greta, I said softly. I've known for a while. There it was, the unraveling. Subtle, but undeniable. Her lips parted, then shut again. She still didn't know what I knew exactly, or how much. That's what made it beautiful. That's what made her spiral. She started, but I interrupted. I'm not mad. That caught her off guard. I saw it. She blinked fast, 2, 3 times, processing it. She expected me to yell, cry, break. But I didn't. I just sipped my drink and looked at her like I was studying a stranger from across the street. You wanted a divorce. You'll get one, I said, keeping my voice calm. But let's be honest about the timeline here. You didn't fall into Miles' arms. You built a runway and launched yourself. Now her hands were shaking. She pushed her glass aside and leaned in close. Can we not do this here? She whispered sharply, glancing around. There were other couples nearby. One woman was watching us openly, sensing the tension. I smiled and leaned in too. Why not? You chose public settings for your lies. Let's have a little symmetry. She didn't answer. She just sat back, folded her arms, and looked past me like she was trying to reset the scene in her mind. But she couldn't, because this wasn't her show anymore. We sat in silence for a few minutes. The waiter came and asked if we were ready to order. I smiled and told him we'd need a few more minutes. Greta excused herself to go to the bathroom. She stayed in there for nearly 20 minutes. When she came back, her mascara was slightly smudged. She didn't bring it up, and neither did I. She didn't touch her food when it arrived. When we got home, she didn't say a word. Just took off her coat, hung it neatly, and went upstairs. What she didn't know, what she still didn't know, was that I hadn't even scratched the surface. She thought I'd hit her with my ace. But I had 3 more cards up my sleeve, and the one I was going to play next would make her wish she'd never met me. The next move was always going to be a social one. See, Greta had built her identity around perception. Curated brunches, flawless Instagram stories, networking events where people called her charismatic, without ever noticing how little substance sat beneath the sparkle. Her world was image. So that's where I decided to begin peeling her apart, not by ruining it all at once, but by feeding the fire slowly from the edges. It started with a casual text to her old friend, Sasha. Sasha and Greta had grown distant lately. I knew that, but they hadn't had a full falling out. Just a slow fade, probably due to Greta's guilt or jealousy or something else she'd never admit. I messaged Sasha myself. Not from my number. That would have tipped her off, but from a clean burner line with a soft opener. Thought you'd want to know what she said about you. Call me if you care. Of course, she called, and I told her just enough. Just enough to stir the old wounds. I didn't lie. That's the best part. I only relayed things Greta had actually said, long ago, thinking I wasn't listening. Nasty, unnecessary comments. The kind you only say about friends you're done with, but haven't told yet. The kind that make blood boil when repeated in the right tone. Sasha's silence on the phone was chilling. It was the sound of someone quietly calculating their exit from a fake friendship. Later that week, I told Greta we had been invited to a dinner party at Richard and Elaine's. They were part of her little social circle. Not the closest, but influential. People who passed judgment with a smile. She was thrilled at first, maybe thinking it was a sign that everything was stabilizing again. That she could still fake her way through the storm. She got dressed up, wore that emerald dress she used to save for events where she expected cameras. Spritzed her overpriced perfume. Practiced her smile in the mirror when she thought I wasn't watching. But the party wasn't for her. It was for me. I arrived first, alone. Greta had stayed behind to finish her makeup, said she'd Uber. That was perfect. It gave me time to talk. I spoke with Elaine in the kitchen while she was slicing lemon wedges. I leaned against the counter and said, just a heads up, there's been some noise about Greta. Someone mentioned she's been involved with a client. Professionally and personally. Elaine's hand paused mid-slice. I continued, calmly. I don't know if it's true. I just thought you should hear it from me, not someone else. I wasn't accusing. I was planting. That's how you rot a tree from the inside. You don't chop. You let the sickness spread itself. When Greta arrived, everyone smiled politely. But the smiles were tighter. The hugs were looser. Conversations drifted away from her, even as she tried to insert herself. No one was rude. Just indifferent. The most brutal kind of cold. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Halfway through the evening, she came up beside me, glass of red wine untouched, and whispered, "Did something happen? Did I miss something?" I looked at her, completely deadpan, and said, "You wanted freedom. This is what it looks like." She didn't speak the rest of the night. Just sat there, still in that emerald dress, surrounded by people who once adored her, now watching her like a glass vase with a crack they hadn't seen before. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just observed. Quiet. Cold. Precise. She still didn't know how deep I was willing to go. But she was starting to understand one terrifying thing. This wasn't revenge. It was a response. And I wasn't finished yet. The strangest part wasn't how quiet the house became. It was how loud she started to get. After the dinner party, Greta began trying to reinsert herself into my world like nothing had happened. She cooked. She started wearing the old t-shirts I liked. She even played that Fleetwood Mac record she used to roll her eyes at. One morning, I came downstairs to find her humming along to it, while making pancakes. Pancakes she hadn't made since year 3 of our marriage. "Remember these?" she said with a hopeful smile, flipping one onto my plate. I looked down at it, then back at her. You never liked cooking in the mornings. She laughed nervously. Yeah, well, things change. I didn't answer. I just picked up my coffee and walked out to the back porch, leaving the pancake untouched. The truth was simple. I had decided to vanish. Not physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I was still in the house, still sleeping in the master bedroom, still using the same towels and mugs and silverware, but I had stopped participating in the world she lived in. When she spoke to me, I gave her polite, emotionless responses. When she touched my shoulder, I flinched like her fingers were cold metal. I didn't argue, didn't punish. I just became absence. The human brain isn't built for this kind of silence, especially not someone like Greta, who thrived on being the center of gravity. She needed feedback. She needed validation. She needed resistance to feel alive. And suddenly, none of that existed anymore. She began asking strange questions. Are you seeing someone? Why are you being so mechanical? Is this because of that stupid party? I didn't deny. I didn't confirm. I just looked at her, said, you asked for distance. I'm giving you the deluxe package. By the second week, she started crying. Not loud sobs, not yet. Just those quiet, helpless tears that leak out late at night when someone thinks the other person's asleep. But I wasn't asleep. I heard everything. I just stayed still. She started slipping notes into my drawer. Little ones, like, can we talk? Or, I'm sorry. One of them just said, I miss you, in shaky handwriting that didn't look like hers. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't some dramatic ploy or tactic. This was what happened when someone shows you who they are, and you stop pretending not to see it. Then came the message I'd been expecting. It was a Tuesday evening. She stood in the doorway of my office, eyes red, fingers fidgeting with her sleeves like a teenager. I made a mistake, she said quietly. I didn't look up. I don't want a divorce, she added. Still, I said nothing. I want to fix it. I'll do anything, Elwood. I mean it. Now I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw it. Not regret, not love, panic. Not because she lost me, but because she realized I wasn't suffering anymore. And if I wasn't suffering, it meant she had no power left. Okay, I said calmly. Then prove it. Her eyes lit up slightly. How? I stood up, walked over to her, leaned in close enough for her to smell my breath. Then I whispered, sign the papers. And I walked away. No threats, no anger, no begging, just a quiet request. Because the cruelest thing I could give her now was exactly what she asked for. By the end of that week, Greta was performing again, overcorrecting. She tried jokes at dinner, compliments in the hallway, even subtle touches when she passed behind me. I didn't react. It wasn't that I didn't feel anything. It's that I'd finally understood something vital. She wasn't trying to love me again. She was trying to escape accountability, and she couldn't do that if I wasn't giving her the script she needed. You can't manipulate silence. One evening, she walked into the living room wearing that faded band tee I used to sleep in back when things were good. I looked at her and didn't say a word. She stood there awkwardly, tugging at the hem, waiting for approval. I offered her none. I just turned the page of the book I wasn't reading and kept pretending I didn't notice the panic growing in her eyes. That night, she stayed awake in bed long after I'd pretended to fall asleep. Her breathing was uneven, her hands restless. Around 2:30 a.m., I felt her lean in slowly, thinking I was unconscious. Her fingers brushed my cheek lightly, almost like a goodbye. Then she whispered, you used to need me. I didn't flinch, didn't move, but something in me almost cracked. Almost. The next morning, I removed all the framed photos of us from the hallway. Quietly, methodically. I didn't break them, didn't hide them. I laid them all face down inside a drawer and closed it. She noticed later that afternoon. I heard her pause, then opened the drawer, then just stand there. She never brought it up. The next day, she returned home from work early, said she wasn't feeling well. She wandered the house like she didn't recognize it anymore. I sat at the dining table doing paperwork, and she hovered behind me like a ghost unsure whether it belonged in the room. I told my sister, she muttered suddenly. About us. About everything. I kept writing. She thinks we should try counseling. Still silent. Greta moved closer. Do you even want to save this? I finally looked up. You asked for an ending, Greta. You don't get to ask for a rewrite after you've read the final page. Her face folded in on itself, not with anger, but grief. Real grief. Because now she understood. This wasn't punishment. This wasn't revenge. This was apathy. And apathy is death to people like her. She backed away like she'd been burned. Went upstairs and shut the door. Not slammed. Shut. But later that night, I found her phone unlocked and open on the kitchen counter. Her texts to Miles were gone. Every thread deleted. Like she thought deleting the evidence would erase the truth. She hadn't talked to him in over a week. But it didn't matter anymore. She had already made her choice. And now, I was making mine. I emailed the lawyer that night. The subject line was short. Let's proceed. The papers were signed 2 weeks later. No courtroom battle. No screaming matches. No dramatic standoffs. Just two people sitting at opposite ends of a polished wooden table, quietly scribbling the end of their story into the margins of a contract they used to think they'd never need. She didn't look up as she signed, but I saw her hands tremble. The pen slipped once. A drop of ink bled onto her last name. I wondered if that was symbolic, or just a twitch of reality catching up with her. We walked out of the lawyer's office into separate directions. No hugs, no final words. Just the sound of city traffic in the background and a sudden gust of wind that pulled her coat tight around her. I didn't watch her walk away. I didn't need to. 3 days later, I packed what little I cared to take. I left the rest. The couch, the knives, the fake smile photos in the closet boxes. They could be hers. Let her fill the empty rooms with whatever stories she needed to sleep at night. I moved into a quiet apartment across town. Nothing special. Second floor. Thin walls. But it had one big window in the living room, the kind that let in full light without permission. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to tension. I didn't dread walking into my own kitchen. I didn't second-guess every word I said or didn't say. I was just still, clean, free. The silence didn't haunt me anymore. It healed me. I picked up painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My hands were rusty, but they remembered enough. I painted sunrises, not because I was trying to be poetic, but because I'd spent so many years waking up in the dark without realizing it. And as weeks turned into months, I laughed more. I slept better. I got used to the space in my bed. I learned how to cook for one, and sometimes for two, when friends came by. Real friends, not social ornaments. I saw Greta once, at a grocery store. She was standing near the frozen section, scanning labels like she was trying to avoid the world. She didn't see me, and I didn't say anything. But I noticed something. She looked smaller. Not physically, just hollow in a way I used to feel every day. For a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I realized I didn't hate her. I didn't wish her pain. I didn't even care to be seen. That, I think, was the truest ending I could have asked for. No grand revenge. No final speech. Just a life she couldn't follow me into. Some people chase closure. I let it find me. And when it didn't knock. It just walked in, sat beside me, and whispered the words I'd been needing all along. You made it.